Everyone thinks they want to find their other half. But here's the thing about finding your other half, it kind of means that you're only half a person to begin with. The truth is, real love rarely feels like completion. It feels like effort, patience, and the hard work of staying present. Jake loves Lady because she's brilliant. Lady loves Jake because he's a mess. That mismatch somehow works because of three fundamentals, but they're not the only ones either. Ruby and Sapphire prove the same truth from the opposite angle. Even when they fall apart, they choose each other again, this time with a deeper grasp of what each partner really needs. And Finn? His story shows us how painful it can be to stumble towards these fundamentals, hurting Flame Princess, trying to change Princess Bubblegum, and finally finding something quieter with Huntress Wizard. Across all of them, the lesson stays the same. So, what is the first thing that makes a relationship last? Not even just in stories, but in real life. It starts with something deceptively simple. Take My Two Favorite People, where Jake gets jealous watching Finn and Lady bond. His instinct? To panic, to try to control it, maybe even sabotage it. But instead of scolding him or making demands, Lady meets him with patience. She reassures him that her friendship with Finn doesn't threaten their relationship. Instead, it strengthens it.
I'm hanging out with Finn because you wanted us to get to know each other better.
In the same episode, Lady says that she loves Jake because he's an idiot. And she means it.
I love you because you're an idiot.
For her, it's proof of how deeply she accepts him. She sees Jake's impulsive and chaotic nature, the very thing that many people would try to fix of him, and she loves him for it. And this is where we arrive at the first fundamental of a good relationship: kindness. Make sure you don't mistake it for niceness, though. Niceness is smiling through gritted teeth. Kindness is something deeper. It's what you do when you see the rough edges in someone else and choose not to sand them down, but to hold them gently, even if it's a bit grating. It shows up in Finn's journey too, but only after some painful lessons. With Flame Princess, Finn manipulates her into fighting the Ice King for his own gain. Exactly the type of love where one tries to change the other, the way we mentioned before. On the surface, this action just looks like a clever jab, but really it's control. It's a betrayal dressed up as a strategy. The fallout is brutal. When Flame Princess realizes that she's been used, her trust in Finn collapses. What could have been the start of something long-lasting burns out almost instantly. Finn learned that trying to manage someone you love makes rebuilding anything almost impossible. That's what makes kindness so fundamental. Years later, with Huntress Wizard, Finn takes a different approach in an attempt at romance. He doesn't try to rush or define their relationship. He just kinda lets it exist, however uncertain and quiet it is. That patience, that willingness to meet the relationship on its own pace, is kindness learned the hard way. We can even see this echoed in another animated couple, Ruby and Sapphire from Steven Universe. Ruby is impulsive, fiery, always acting in the heat of the moment. Sapphire is calm, deliberate, and sees the bigger picture. They don't try to rewrite each other's nature, and that's exactly what makes the relationship work. They complement each other, and they are kind towards each other. In Keystone Motel, they have a fight because Ruby wants to stay angry at Pearl while Sapphire has already seen that they'll all get along again in the future, so what's the point? Most couples would try to force the other person to see it their way, but Ruby doesn't demand that Sapphire feel angry at the moment, and Sapphire doesn't insist that Ruby stop caring about what's happening right now. They are frustrated with each other, of course, but they never ask the other person or tell the other person to become someone else. That's kindness in action. Loving someone's difficult moments without trying to fix them.
Sometimes people that love each other can hurt each other's feelings without meaning to.
Kindness shows up in the small moments too. When your partner does something that annoys you, instead of snapping, you get curious, you wonder what's really driving that behavior behind it. That simple shift from judgment to curiosity is what transforms annoying quirks into the things that you actually can love about someone. And that's where the second fundamental begins, the one that asks you to stop performing and start being seen. There's this moment in Flute Spell where Finn is completely naked, bathing alone in the forest. No armor, no sword, no heroic quest to distract from what he's really doing. He's playing music for someone who might not even be listening. For once, Finn drops the performance. He admits his secret feelings. He was playing his flute song for Huntress Wizard. saying that he would have kept playing until his flute broke. And Huntress Wizard meets his vulnerability with her own, admitting that her flute spell was for him as well. This is what the second fundamental looks like. Two people daring to show the parts of themselves they'd rather keep hidden. This vulnerability allows them to connect on a deeper level. It's similar to Jake's approach with Lady Rainicorn. When Jake finally opens up about his jealousy, that's when he's finally able to connect with Lady again. He shows vulnerability, even when it's embarrassing and makes him look petty. He doesn't pretend he's above feeling left out. And Lady, she does something similar in her own way. When she reveals her pregnancy in Lady and Peoples, she breaks her usual Korean-only communication to tell them in English.
I am pregnant!
I'm puppies?
Vulnerability requires meeting someone in the language they understand. The contrast here is painful if you've ever watched regular shows Mordecai. He spends entire episodes performing an idealized version of himself around Margaret. Whenever he's near her, he freezes up, loses focus, stumbles over his words, even sinks into depression when he can't keep up the act around her. He wants her to see a version of him that's smooth, confident, always in control, but because he never risks showing her who he really is, there's nothing real for her to connect to. Moments that could be honest can turn into awkward silences and deflections, and eventually that distance becomes the relationship itself. Without vulnerability, Mordecai and Margaret never move past the surface level. Shared vulnerability means trusting your partner to handle your actual feelings, and that trust, it has to go both ways. The first two fundamentals teach us to accept someone for who they are in the present moment and to be honest and vulnerable with them to form a deeper connection. But even together, they're not enough, because relationships don't just live inside one person. At some point, you have to cross that line between your world and theirs. That's where the third fundamental comes in. It's most evident from Steven Universe. Ruby burns hot and reacts instantly, while Sapphire sees the long game before it happens, which often puts them at odds. They've learned that staying together, though, means more than being right, and their fusion as Garnet shows that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose each other despite your differences. Jake does the same with Lady Rainicorn. In Paper Pete, Jake studies an enormous book called Rainicornucopia, an unabridged history of rainicorns. He's thinking ahead to their future children, wanting to educate them about their mother's culture and history.
One day, I'm probably gonna have half rainbow pupsters. I gotta be able to share my baby's culture.
And he tries. In the end, though, he just decides against it.
Ugh. I was reading the same paragraph over and over for like 11 minutes. I guess I'm gonna give up on learning everything about Rainicorn history. Don't tell Lady.
But oh well, that's Lady's kindness in action. She wouldn't expect Jake to do so. For Finn, understanding is the hardest lesson of all. Early Finn only ever saw Princess Bubblegum as perfect, an ideal to be won, and not as a person with her own struggles and history. With Flame Princess, he tried to change her nature instead of listening to her. But with Huntress Wizard, something has shifted. When she admits she believes that exceptional beasts can't fall in love, Finn doesn't argue or try to prove her wrong. He listens. He engages with her worldview, even though it leaves him unsure of his own feelings too. That moment shows a new kind of maturity. For the first time, he's not trying to fix someone. He's trying to understand them as they are, even when it's complicated. And that's the heart of this third fundamental, understanding. It means stepping into someone else's perspective, even when it unsettles your own. These three fundamentals don't stand alone, of course. They weave into each other so tightly that if you lose one, the others start to unravel. Look at Jake and Lady. Their relationship works because all three pillars are alive in it. There's kindness in the way we see Lady loving Jake's chaos and accepting him. There's vulnerability, the moment she reveals her pregnancy in English and how she communicates her emotions with him. And the time that Jake admits how torn he feels between her relationship with Finn. And there's understanding, like how Jake is studying Rainicorn history or worrying about meeting her parents or wanting to understand her more. And then there's Ruby and Sapphire. They've split apart before, but when they choose each other again, it's with new honesty and vulnerability. Ruby admits how much she misses Sapphire, even while enjoying her own adventure. When they reunite, they choose to stay together, no matter their differences. They fill in each other's blanks. Finn's journey shows us the cost of missing those fundamentals. With Princess Bubblegum, he never really understood her world. With Flame Princess, he couldn't show her kindness when it mattered most. It took Huntress Wizard for him to finally put the pieces together, slowing down, being honest, and trying to meet her perspective even when it hurt. But here's the truth. You can't offer real kindness without understanding what someone actually needs. You can't be vulnerable unless you trust that kindness is there to receive you. And you can't understand someone unless you're willing to be vulnerable enough to see the world through their eyes. Only together do they become something strong enough to last. Maybe the reason we make relationships feel so complicated is because simple feels impossible. It's easier to argue about chores or schedules or who texted back first than it is to look someone in the eye and say you're scared of not feeling seen or loved. But the shows we love keep reminding us what actually makes relationships work. Like Aang and Katara in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Aang's optimism sometimes blinds him to the weight of Katara's grief. Katara, meanwhile, can struggle to understand his relentless hope, even though he also has grief in his past. But again and again, regardless of their differences and their differences of opinion, they choose to bridge the gap between them by listening, steadying each other, and growing stronger because they're willing to step into the other's perspective, even if it leads to a little conflict sometimes. That's understanding in action. When you line them up, Jake and Lady's gentleness, Ruby and Sapphire's balance, Finn's hard-earned maturity, a pattern emerges here. None of them is perfect. No character is perfect, no person is perfect. That's the point. What makes their relationships real is the way they keep practicing those three fundamentals in a realistic and human way: kindness, vulnerability, and understanding. And maybe that's the real secret. Love doesn't complete us. Instead, it gives us the space to become more of ourselves in the presence of someone else doing the same. And if you want to see what happens when these fundamentals get twisted into something destructive, check out our deep dive on the dark side of chasing love. Because sometimes the pursuit of love doesn't bring us closer to someone, it pushes us further away from ourselves. Check that out down there.